And then when there's a little red. Hello, and welcome to another Industry Live. I'm back, Kimberly, and this is
Darren Beers.
Darren Beers. He is helping me fill in my guest that we were supposed to have today with Lizzie. Lisa's gonna be back November the 7th to do our second part series. This is our first part series on the work Scaries, and I appreciate you joining me today.
No worries.
Before we get
this is my work scare.
Yes. No, impromptu interviews.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But before we go live, wherever you're watching us, we are on That Kimberly Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So wherever you're watching us, if you have a question, please leave in the comments. If it's a specific question for Darren and myself, make sure you tag one of us. If you're watching, if this information is useful and helpful, share it with your friends, please. Maybe like or subscribe to the channel so you know when we're going live, which we are moving these lives from Wednesday to Tuesday starting 2 weeks from this Tuesday. Okay, so just so you guys know, I know it's confusing, but it's okay. It'll be all right.
Hey,
right? We'll figure it out.
It's National Tech Day. We've got a lot of tech people that can figure it out.
Thank you very much. It is according to the national calendar that I get emailed to myself that tells me when Siblings Day is and when all those other.
I want to know when Pizza Day is. That's for sure.
We'll have to Google that. But I have seen Pizza Day. But yes, today is National Techie Day. So and you are a techie, right?
I am.
Yeah.
I am.
So let's jump into this conversation. We're going to start off with a little icebreaker, though, because it was something as I was sitting here trying to be spontaneous, wanting to show up for the audience, even though I didn't have a guest. I was either going to go by myself, go live, if you weren't able to jump on with me. But I'm so grateful. Oh, and we're on location. That's the other thing at Scaries.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm a huge Scaries fan, and I'm very appreciative that I am able to come here and work remotely and go live here at Scaries.
We love having you here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We love having you here.
So let's jump on to it. Before we go to the work Scaries, I have an icebreaker that I was looking through some material, trying to get inspired to really go deep if we could a little bit, maybe. And my question to you is, given the choice of anyone in the world, whom would you want to be a dinner guest?
Well, this person's no longer living, but Ray Charles. And I know that's.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Why Ray Charles?
It is. You know, if you think about it, the creative mind is something that just has always fascinated me. I have 3 children, and they all think differently.
Yeah.
And they all have their strengths. And I didn't realize that when I was first raising them until they got to be about 10 or 11 years old. And I said, oh, well, you're a little bit more creative. So I've got to help you with your education in a different way.
Yeah.
And so
how very observant as a parent.
Well, and it's hard because, you know, they don't think like me, and I think everybody projects onto everybody else. Like, okay, you must think like me, so I'll explain something to you like I would be explaining it to myself.
Yeah.
And so the creative mind has always fascinated me. Music is a passion of mine. I'm not musically inclined, but just love music.
Okay.
One of the things about Ray Charles.
The same way.
one of the things about Ray Charles is I just think when you look at the era that he grew up in, and where he came from in the Deep South. And you look at what he was able to overcome, his blindness, sharecropper's son, losing a brother that he thought was his fault, overcoming drug addiction, and then became very politically active when he protested the Jim Crow laws in Georgia, and ultimately became a catalyst for getting the Jim Crow laws overturned. A lot of firsts that he did. You know, he was the first person to bring a full orchestra into studio in recording. And he was also the first person in layered music that sung his own background vocals.
Wow. Yeah. And he inspired a whole generation of children and musical artists. I shouldn't just say children, but anybody who had any kind of musical inclination. That he inspired people, especially those who might be blind or have some sort of disability that they wouldn't be looked at as, 100% or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'd love to have dinner with him just to be able to say, hey, I'd like to find out what drove you to that.
Yeah.
Because there's probably so many opportunities to just quit.
Yeah.
So many opportunities just to say,
forget it.
Forget
He got the
this
Scaries.
is too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. His Scaries, right?
He got his
His
Scaries.
Scaries.
Yeah. For
And, you know, just admire someone who, when they hit that many obstacles in life,
yeah,
can just continue to push through and push through. And push
very,
through.
very inspiring.
Yeah, very much so.
You know, I definitely, when I start my day, I always try to start with gratitude. And the first thing is that I wake up, that I can see, that I can smell, that I can hear, and that I can use my limbs to get where I need to go. Right. Because at the end of the day, you know, we're not always promised another day. Exactly. And so now I'm awake, and I just start with that gratitude. Right. You know, it gets me in the right frame of mind.
The fact that you woke up.
Yes, absolutely.
That's another one. The fact that
I
how about you? Who would you want to have dinner with?
I think I would want to have dinner with. Oh,
me? Oh,
yes. Well, you know, a part of me is because some of my favorite people are a combination of musical and techie at the same time. But let's think. Right now, in this time of my life, I think I would want to have Lizzo as a guest.
Oh, wow.
A guest dinner, just to you know, ask her and talk to her about where she gets her inspiration when it comes to combining like her flute with, you know, with her lyrics, with, you know, her rap, you know, to singing, to, you know, her albums, you know, the fact that she Pink, the Barbie movie, she sings the theme song in that movie, Pink. And just where she got, you know, where she gets her inspiration, I'd be very interested in hearing, and how she struggled, but yet still overcame. She is a huge, she gives me a lot of inspiration to, like, she loves her body, and she doesn't shy away from, sometimes it's, you know, it's a little all out there, you know, and that's any artist, I feel, you know, that they definitely,
when you're as talented as she is, and you can cross genres in music, and you can feel comfortable in your own skin, and all those things, I think it's very body image forward, right? Very positive. It's very
it inspires me to not worry so much about my, you know, that I'm comfortable in my skin. Like I get every decade, I say I get more comfortable in my own skin. So she would be one right now in my life that
I'm comfortable with my Scaries.
That's a good segue. Right? Yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
So yes, the work scaries, we're going to jump into the first work scary for me is being late. So bad that I used to set 3 alarm clocks, and I would either, well, you know, my mom has dementia, so I don't, she doesn't use a phone anymore. But I would call friends or make sure my roommate, if I had a roommate at the time, or boyfriend or whatever, would make sure I'd wake up so I could be there, not just be there on time, but be there, you know, a little bit before to prepare. I get so anxious about being late that I don't, and not oversleeping. So that's my first work scary.
Well, today you were here.
I was
3 hours early.
I was way early. I wanted to make sure the internet worked. I wanted to make sure set up, and I wanted to knock out. I always realize going, you know, presenting and being in sales, that I don't want that other person to have the perception that I don't value their time. So it was just something that was kind of ingrained in me as a child, that I would always be on time. So it comes to a detriment that I get over anxious about making sure that I'm there at least 15 minutes before, so that way I can test the internet, you know. And when you're doing presentations, when it comes to tech, you just don't ever know, right? I mean,
no, you could get here and
something can happen.
You know, take a power hit.
So it's
whatever.
It's really so I always like to have the backup plan to the backup plan, just in case, right? That's definitely. What's one of your?
Well, it's interesting, because one of the things that you mentioned was that you want to make sure that you're on time, because you respect the feelings of the people that you're meeting. And so you don't want to have that selfish perception of, oh, well, I'm just going to be late.
And not be prepared.
And not be prepared. So for me, it's a little bit around that. When I get focused on something, so I'm very balanced in being left-brained and right-brained. And when I get very focused on something, and I'm an extrovert, and I think I told you that earlier. But when I get really focused on something, I tend to, my sphere around me of consciousness seems to really, really shrink. And I often have to take a step back and think, okay, wait a minute. Just make sure that in your focus and your drive, that you're not giving off this aura of unfriendliness, cold or aloof, or things like that, because that's completely the opposite of who I am. Right? My goal is to make you feel comfortable. My goal is to make you feel welcome. We love entertaining people at our houses, and that's exactly that reason. Is we love having people and making them feel comfortable. So when I do get focused in work mode, and that is, I have to be conscious about pulling back and making sure that I'm not completely ignoring everything else.
So you're very self-aware about your surroundings to make sure you're including people, or that you're interacting with them, so that you're not coming out. Because when I could see how that could appear that you were aloof, or that you didn't care, or and you're unfocused, and that would be the wrong
impression. When you're juggling a bunch of stuff, right? When you're sitting there juggling a bunch of stuff, that one ball that's up in the air versus the couple that you focused on, right? You want to make sure that you value that you value that group or those people, and you don't want, like, I'm focused on this right now, but please don't think I've forgotten about
anything else.
Exactly.
It's definitely a juggling act when you're in especially being in the sales, because you're it is one thing. The other thing, that the second work scary that I have had trouble with is emails. Do you ever have any, like, what's your, like, before I want to ask your scary.
So the kind of around that email is, my biggest fear is that reply all button.
Okay.
And
kind of like the Southwest commercial.
Exactly. And so my concern is, when you're writing an email and it's an internal email, the tone of that email is very different than if you're addressing the client. Now, the subject matter may be the same. You're going to pretty much talk about the same thing, but your tone is different.
It's shorter. It's shorter. It's more abrupt. It's definitely not.
So
it's got kind candor in there, probably. Just candor.
Exposing some of the warts that might happen or whatever. And so the tone and the care that you take in an internal email isn't as great as the care you take for an external to a client. And so my big concern has always been, hey, make sure that on this email that you've either replied to that had a client on it, that you remove that client from the distribution before you hit send, or that you do something to ensure that you're keeping those two separate.
My big thing back in the day when I was doing email, I used to template, because I'm such a bad speller. I'm dyslexic. I'm self-diagnosed dyslexic. And so I switch letters or words. So I rely on Grammarly. I've relied on Grammarly even before Grammarly was cool to rely on, right? It definitely is something, but it's a service that I pay for, because spell check, could only get you so far. So Grammarly definitely is a service. But so I was writing out this email, and it was one of the companies is no longer around anymore, but they were two management companies. And I was just taking the person who I was sending it to, I was changing out their name and their company's name. And the rest I had templated out so it made sense, so that I could just shoot off a bunch of emails, because this is pre-MailChimp. So it was definitely something that I spent a lot of time, I overread. I send the email, and as soon as I hit send, I realized I hadn't changed from the person's name to the right person's name and the right company name. And this gentleman replied back to me, was like, "This is not this company, but I wish you the best of luck with that." Like, it was very snarky, super not very kind. And almost 15 years ago. Well, not 15 years ago. Yeah, probably 15 years ago. But I just was floored that he could, like, at least give me a little bit of grace and be like, "Hey, sorry, but you sent their email to the wrong person," and just left that, and just acted like I really wasn't trying to earn his business. But what would you do in that sense
Well,
if that ever
it's happened to me.
It has
So
happened to you, okay.
it has happened where you hit the reply all and you forget that, a client was on that original distribution and you're thinking, okay, well, all the people that are on that distribution list are the people I need to reply to on this, but internal.
Yeah.
And so you write your email and it's much more candid than you would typically have for a client email. And unlike your experience, the client was very understanding. And I think I just said, hey, listen, apologize. I probably shouldn't have had you on that distribution. Not that there's anything in that email that I wouldn't want you to see, but clearly it's much more candid than I would expose
That's nice
a company. And they were very gracious. They unlike your situation, it was they were very gracious. They were completely understanding.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think as humans we worry about, right? And because you want everything to be perfect, but sometimes perfection holds us back.
Right.
If we're trying to get the perfect tone, the perfect everything, and we don't send the email, then we're wasting time, right? So that's my other scary is like that I get so paralyzed in my email and making it perfect that I don't get that work done, that I don't send out that email, right?
As I've gotten older, those are the things that you take from life experiences. And one of them is, you mentioned perfection. And there was this great saying, it's people over perfection. And so, if you're spending more time worrying about something being perfect when you could be, again, you don't want to do shoddy work. You don't want to, just, do,
whatever,
flippant work. But if you're spending more time focused on perfection versus the people that you're interacting with, that's an imbalance, I think, a big imbalance. And so there is that, with age comes a little bit of wisdom that you learn these things as you go. And hopefully when mentoring people, you can get those things across. That's one of the things that I do. Yeah. People over perfection.
Yeah. And the more you're present for people,
right.
The more, like I've found, the more that I can be present in the moment, whether I'm doing something like this, or I'm just talking to them one-on-one without any cameras, or we're talking on the phone. I try not to be doing multiple things like I used to. I used to over multitask, which is work scary because for me as well, because when I over multitask, I could drop the ball. I could drop a ball, right? And dropping balls for a long time it was very important for me not to drop any balls. If you've dropped some balls, please leave it in the comments. Let us know if you dropped, what are your work scaries when you're, we're thinking along those lines. But when I found that I became more present in the moment, I dropped less balls, right? Like, and when I didn't stack as much stuff on top of myself, like I'm working on it every day to, be self-aware about not overly committing, not overly stacking stuff, so that I can get to the things that I need to get done and be proficient in it.
Well, see, my work scary has morphed. Look at 5-10 years ago, maybe even longer than that. Email was that form of communication. Now you have chat on your computer, you have text messaging, you have instant messenger, you have all these other forms of communication, and that is equally as scary. And I'm sure people out there have done the same thing, where you get a text message, you get a second text message, you go to reply to a message, and then you accidentally reply to the wrong person. Now, hopefully,
because they're at the top. We're exactly your search.
That's the evolution of that scary. It doesn't stay with the email and the reply all. But it comes into
that more wrong people to be able to forwarding or just respond all to more of the wrong people. It is definitely something that morphs into a bigger scary. But having I have found that if I would just have the grace to forgive myself and move on, that I won't be so focused on it happening again, because then that's just going to bring more of that to me. In my opinion, I found that if I forgive myself and I move on, I stay focused on staying present, then that work scary won't happen again.
There's this good saying, it's called, as long as my side of the street is clean, I'm good, right? And so what I mean by that is, you know, I have found being completely transparent and honest with somebody, saying, hey, look, I'm sorry. That wasn't supposed to go to you.
Yeah.
And taking ownership of it instead of, trying to make excuses for it.
Yeah.
Take ownership for it. Say, hey, I'm sorry. Most people are are forgiving.
Yeah.
Most people understand, I made that mistake too, or they can relate to it somehow.
Yeah. Taking ownership is key. So just a little tip of that, if you're out there and you have a work scary, taking ownership of that scary is freeing, and it's also showing your coworkers and or your clients that you're self-aware when you're, especially if you've made a mistake.
Right.
It's definitely something that I try to always be the first, because I'm my biggest critic. I'm the person I beat myself up more than any, when I make a mistake, I'm the first person to be like, okay, you made that mistake and that's really bad, right? So I have to also give myself a little bit of grace.
You bet.
But being honest about I messed that up. And reflecting back, like, how can I make that different? I definitely do a lot of self-reflection more now in my later years of life than I probably did in my younger years of life.
I think that's just
it's one of those things, But it's definitely something that I know that has come with age, right? We just definitely something. Are there any other work scaries that you can think of that are?
I think a lot of, being unprepared for something. I think that's one of the things that I get concerned about. And I think it's exactly what you were talking about. When you start multitasking, and you start over multitasking, it's very easy to have something that you thought was a lower priority sit, and then it sits, and then it sits, and then it sits, and it becomes comfortable to go, okay, well, that just kind of it's kind of gone away. Well, it doesn't really go away. And so that's part of it is multitasking and over multitasking. And then ultimately finding, oh, darn,
something fell
through the cracks, and now I'm not prepared to do what I need to do. And that's one of those
being realistic. Do you ask for help in those times?
Realistically, no. It's funny because as I mentor people, that's one of the things that it's easy to advise somebody on how to do something and what to do. Very hard to take your own advice at times, and I'm guilty of that. Not always taking my own advice, and so I'm getting better at that, of asking for help. But I'm one of those people that feels like they need to know everything and need to know how to do everything. And so consequently, it's like, oh, I don't want to bother you and ask you for help. I'll just do it myself. And then again, it's just that vicious cycle, because when you get in that pattern, it just stacks up.
I definitely ask for help now. I didn't before, but I've learned with age and experience and self-awareness that asking for a little bit of help, there's nothing wrong with that. Especially if it's benefiting my client. I want I already feel bad if I drop the ball. I want to step up my game. I definitely make sure that I do so by asking for help. It's something that is took a long time for me to be okay.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I would tell you that I'm not perfection when it comes to that.
Nobody's perfect, right? We're all imperfect. We're striving to get better. So
absolutely,
I do appreciate you joining me. And folks out there, if there is a work scary you want to share, please leave it in the comments. We would love to hear about it. It is definitely something. I'm gonna come back we'll be back on Wednesday with Sharon Herrera, LGBTQ Saves. We're going to be interviewing her on Wednesday. And then after that, we're going to go back to the Tuesday schedule. So I appreciate you.
I'm looking forward to your next live. That sounds like an interesting topic.
She's been a nonprofit co-founder for almost 15 years, runs a tight ship, and has, they're just doing amazing things out there. So I'm super excited to have her on next week, and I'm super excited to have had you here with us.
Thank you.
Here at Sphere X is even better. On location always makes me happy too. And that you were so willing to go on the fly, because it is definitely something. I know it's a hard skill hard skill to be able to roll, you know, to go on the, like, yeah. So I very appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much.
You were
Again,
open
I'm
to
looking forward. My wife and I were very big allies. We're
okay.
big supporters.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll have Lizzie back on the 7th to talk about the part 2 of Work Scaries. So until next week, let me just throw up, if you want to be a guest, you can email me. Here's the email, Kimberly@marketingdoer. This is when you're I'm multitasking, folks. I'm putting up the lower thirds. And then here's also a link that you can click on so you can follow wherever you want to watch the show. And there's some also resources there. If you want to watch some past shows, this little ticker right here will tell you. If you just go to Google, put in #ThatKimberly, everywhere I've gone live will show up and you can pick. So
that's awesome.
I know, right?
It's high five.
So until next week, thank you guys. Remember, sharing is caring, and we're out.
Adios.
Bye.
Peace.